you with Tacitus today. Tacitus Today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the increasing an ever-increasing number of Indian migrants that are coming to the West. Well, when I say the West, whether it be Australia or Britain, Canada, the United States, New Zealand, it doesn't matter. There's something approaching a mass exodus of people out of India into the West, fully agreed to and facilitated and supported and funded by the globalist cabal. And nor is it just peasant workers, the Brahmin class, or the lower end of the Brahmin class in India. There's, 50, 60 million of them, I suppose, out of a population of 1.5 billion with a B. And they're increasingly taking up jobs in IT and accounting and all sorts of things like that. So the mass exodus of Indians out of India to the West is a central part of the Indian economy, but it's also part of their sort of new cultural understanding and justification of the universe. I'll come back to that in a minute, but I bumped into the guy. This was like at an Indian from sort of the Trade Commission, I suppose. He's one of the trading groups that's sponsored by the Indian government, and I was talking to him about some products that he was associated with, and he jumped on. He just volunteered this almost straight away. So, the amount of Indians leaving India and coming to the West is increasing, and we're going to see Indians will be, this is his words, Indians will be a majority in all white Western countries, over the next 25 years, given current trends. Now, I don't doubt that, by the way, and I think it's even worse than that, because when you add Pakistanis and Bangladeshis and Nepalese and all these sort of people, you add that, and there's something in the order of 2.2, 2.3 billion with a B people in that Indian subcontinent, all of whom want to get the fuck out of there and come to the rich white West. That's the only, they get up in the morning, that's all they dream about. It's a never-ending wet dream in every Indian family to go to the rich white West. I mean, only the very richest at the apex, the few thousand families that control the Indian subcontinent, only they do. And even they want to do it for vainglorious personal aggrandizement reasons. Nonetheless, so given that he said that, and he cites it as something to be proud of, Indians are leaving India because it's such a shit place, and they're coming to the rich white West, and they're going to be the majority soon. And he put this forward as some huge achievement, as if Indians have just organically and naturally proved themselves to be the geniuses of the universe, coming from one of the poorest countries in the world, and they're all pouring into the rich white West, and he seems to think that's an indication of how fantastic Indians are. And his to follow on, once Indians are the majority everywhere, then they'll set things up to suit themselves, and they'll utterly and totally destroy Western economies in the same way that they destroy their own economy in India. But that's a separate discussion. So I let him sort of pipe on a bit. So I asked, why is it then that everyone in the Indian subcontinent, so I included Pakistan and everything, and Indian thing obviously as well, why does everyone in the Indian subcontinent want to leave India, leave the subcontinent, and come to the rich white West? Why? Oh, it's rich. The West is rich. So that's why we want to come. No, I get that. But why do they want to leave India? Why? Oh, and then he sort of looked at me quizzing. He said, "You have to understand, India is a very poor country, and Pakistan is a very poor country. Bangladesh is a poor country. Nepal is a poor country. So we want to come. We all want to go to a rich white country. We all want to go to a rich country, and the rich countries are the white countries. So that's why we come. So he spoke with an air and a tone of absolute entitlement. Yet we are entitled to. You must not be allowed to stop us, to question us, to hold us accountable, to hold us to any sort of standard. No. Well, we decide what the standard is. We decide if we're going to come to the West. It's nothing to do with you people that are already in the West, you white people. So I thought, well, this is interesting. And the way he was standing and his tone, this guy wasn't a peasant, but the way he was standing, his tone was one of absolute and total entitlement. And the mere fact of questioning it was in itself an outrage, or asking questions. We're entitled, I don't have to tell you, we're entitled. So okay. Now he went on. We sort of had a bit of. I wanted to keep him talking for as long as possible. So I needed to tone things down a little bit on my side. But I pointed out to him, well, there's not enough money in the entire White West to give Indians the standard of living that Western people currently, or used to anyway, used to have. So the more Indians that come, the poorer everyone's going to be. And when there's a certain critical mass of Indians arrive, then the standard of living in the West won't be much different from what it is in India anyway. He doesn't see a problem with that. His attitude is, we'll steal whatever we can while we can steal it. If there's anything here to steal, then we'll steal it. And if there's nothing left to steal, then we'll go back home. That was his general attitude. And I was aghast at this. I thought, holy crap. That's how much they do not give a shit about the West. It is simply a place to come and loot. So and I ended up saying that, thinking I'd got about as much out of it as I was going to get. I said, so what? All you people just want to come to the White West so you can loot, and I use this term, loot the white man's treasury. And he just shrugged and he said, well, you guys stole everything we had 100 years ago, so it's only just and fitting and right and that we come and steal all your stuff. I said, well, hold on, what did the white man steal exactly? Did they steal all your trains and your train? Excuse me, what did the white? India was one of the richest countries in the world. Now, this is part of the propaganda that goes around India. The Brahmin class, that's the upper class, the apex class in India. They have never forgiven the British for supplanting them as the apex class, because they were effectively demigods at the time. And the British came in and made the locals realise that these Brahmins were just people, and they were mostly corrupt and parasitic, and were living, off the wealth that was stolen from the lower classes. And the Brahmins have never forgiven the British for that, or the white people would be in their overall scheme of things. But more importantly, I guess, is that the way an economy was measured before industrial capacity, before the Industrial Revolution, in effect, or even the Agricultural Revolution, before any of that came along, the scientific era, the mercantile era, before all that, an economy was measured by its population volume. So any area of the world that had a large population, each person was viewed as one unit of production. Therefore, if you had a population, as India did, of 150 million or something at the time, and England only had a population of 7 million, then India was viewed as being considerably richer than England, because one measure of one person in the population was one unit of production, productive output. And so on that basis, India and China, being the most populous places, they were the largest economies. Not because they were efficient or big or productive, or they produced a lot of goods and services, not because of that, but only because of their large population mass. Thus, it was assumed or treated that they were, one member of the population is one unit of production. Now, India didn't exist back in the day. It was just a patchwork of petty states and so on, fighting each other and so on. So this idea. So what's happened is that all those states and areas of what later on became India were added together population-wise, and then it assumed, well, this was what India was, but it wasn't a nation state, and the peasants were not producing. The peasants were living hand to mouth, and they weren't producing anything that could be traded or sold, or hardly anything. So the economy was, in actual terms, if you take out the subsistence factor, was really very small. Now, by contrast, England, with its much smaller population at the time, even before the Industrial Revolution, this is during the Mercantile Age, had many technologies already that the Indians either didn't have or didn't use. Things like the windmills and the water wheels and various devices, grinding stones that were connected to water wheels and windmills to grind grain and so on. So even the technological level at the time was vastly superior in places like England than it was. So if you look at the per capita wealth of Western Europe compared to India, even at the time of the mercantile age, the 1500s, Western Europe, white Western Europe was vastly more productive per capita and wealth producing per capita than India ever was. India was a basket case back then. It just happened to have a huge population, which is, again, based on how they measured economic mass back in the day, suggests or implies it was it was one of the larger economies. But on a per capita basis and a productivity basis, it was shithole then as it is now. So that propaganda, we were rich until Whitey turned up, that's bullshit. India was not a nation then, and technologically already they were falling far behind Western Europe and the white populations. By the time the Industrial Revolution came along, the gap between, you had England with a population of 40 million was twice as wealthy as India with a population of 300 million. That gives you some idea of the differential in productivity and output and the application of technology. Now, the British put in a national language in India. They turned it into a nation instead of a patchwork of petty fiefdoms. They put in national transport networks of roads and bridges and trains and courts of law, contract, the whole, a fuckload of things. Parliamentary system, a public service, all that the British bequeathed to India. Without that, India would be a worse basket case by far than it is today. So, but this is something these people don't know and don't want to know and don't understand and don't care about. This Indian guy was quite indignant that I would even question him on their right to just come to the West en masse. They have every right. He was even further indignant, when I spoke about, so you just come to loot the white man's treasury, you don't have to contribute anything, to build anything, to create anything, you just come to steal, is that it? And he was, why not? We're allowed to. Every Indian that comes to the White West wants to take. I'm sure you'll get exceptions, but that's why they come to the West. Now he concedes, as many other Indians do, by the way, life is much better here. It's cleaner, it's tidier, it's more orderly, it's less corruption and this and that. He'll readily concede that. But he comes from a wealthier class of people where they can afford to pay bribes to everybody to get things done. So the idea of coming to a first world country like Australia, where bribery doesn't quite work in the same way, and if you're going to really bribe people, it has to be more expensive. But his view on that is, you just make sure Indians get the key jobs that you need, and you bribe those other Indians, and so on. This is it. Why would any country anywhere in the world import these people? Why, oh why? They're nothing but a disaster currently, and it's a ticking time bomb for the time when they salivate over the thought that there'll be a majority in Australia and elsewhere around the West, and will reorganise things to suit themselves. It's insane. You've been fantastic today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.